Welcome everybody to another episode of Fantasy News. I am your disheveled goblin host, Daniel Green, and today, we have some interesting news to talk about. But first, I actually would like to add an addendum to a story we did in Emergency Fantasy News on earlier in this week, and it's simply that I forgot to include the fact that when I was announcing that there is a First Law movie in development, that Joe Abercrombie has apparently written the script. There are authors out there who, if I heard this, I would say, like, script writing's different than writing a book. I'm a bit concerned. But with Best Served Cold already basically hitting like a Kill Bill or many other movies of that genre, and Joe Abercrombie's writing being often from his own mouth, very movie inspired. I mean, he's already written stuff for things like Love, Death, Robots. So if someone could just jump over and write a solid movie script, it's gonna be Joe Abercrombie. If you want even more details, like the director and lead actress already announced attached, link right there. But next up, for my J. Kristoff fans, we have some big news as the author has tweeted out, March 2024, Return to the Empire. Empire of the Damned by J. Kristoff, to be released in 2024 with the cover coming soon. I still haven't tackled J. Kristoff's works. I need to do that. Damn it. But in a fantasy story that even the most casual fan has probably heard of, Neil Gaiman's Norse Mythology is finally getting a complete deluxe edition that will retail November this year for about $125. Volumes 1 through 3 will total about 450 pages, and I am a fan of this art. But in a story that, like, probably no one's heard of, The Hobbit is getting its anniversary special deluxe edition limited release in the same run as these ones. So it's like the green version of this red guy. You're probably gonna get it if you got this one, and if you don't got this one, you might still get it. I don't know about your collecting habits. For those unaware, the big appeal of this set of 3 that has also had a Silmarillion edition released is that they are containing a bunch of original drawings from Tolkien. I know those ones sold like crazy, so I'm pretty sure these will do very well themselves. The Royal Mail, yes, that one, has issued stamps to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Warhammer, which is really goddamn cool. I have 2 questions for people who are into collecting specifically stamps as a hobby. 1, is this now less of an interesting stamp to get because a whole bunch of Warhammer fans will probably be getting it, therefore in the long run it'll be more common? Or because it's such a specific thing, celebrating something that not every fan is going to hear about and will maybe want to buy after the fact, it's over once they discover that these existed at some point, does that mean the value is still there because there's a potential resale market, or does value not come into it at all and a bunch of collectors are just going to get these because they're weird and different? I actually even have a few more questions. Why was Warhammer chosen of everything? I get that it's the 40th anniversary, but it just feels like there's so many franchises that could be up for consideration, and now that I think of it, I've been working on this in my own time just a smidge. Why do stamps of all things get collected? Is there some form of stamp god that we're not being allowed targeted? Though it does imply the existence of a stamp Warhammer stock market with the adaptation that's potentially in the works with Henry Cavill attached. I, along with many others, are left wondering, does Cavill know / is he safe? I would like him to know about the market, but how would he not know him? Well, that is where the sleeper cells come into play. You just have to keep them on set. Inevitably, you end up asking the people behind this, are they fans or fraud? Without any further information to actually back this up, I am left wondering who has the evidence, but that makes it sound like I don't have anything to talk about. So instead, I've written documents. Okay, Daniel, you silly goose, where would the documents be? Well, you gotta go back to where it all started. The stamps themselves. It's the perfect crime. So what am I talking about? Well, I don't know. We also got a cover release from Orbit for Warrior of the Wind, the sequel to The Son of the Storm by Sui Davies Okemboa. I'm trying to remember my reading experience with the first book. I think I was lukewarm on it, maybe a little bit higher than that, but I'm always excited to see authors continue on with their series, and I look forward to seeing how they're improving, changing their craft with every entry from every author. If you've never sat down with your friends to like talk about how an author's style has changed throughout a series you've both read, I highly recommend you do so because you'd be surprised what insights you end up having and what insights some of your friends might. Just a nerdy recommendation. But scooting on over into the quickie news, we also got a poster for the upcoming One Piece show, and I'm going to do my best impression of the masthead now. But before we get into celebrating some goblins and then talking about a story that really annoys me, we need to talk about the fact that yes, our upcoming live-action How to Train Your Dragon adaptation has cast its Hiccup and Astrid. Mason Thames, who was absolutely fantastic in The Black Phone, if you're a fan of horror movies, check that one out, and Nico Parker, who played Joel's daughter in The Last of Us, have been cast as Hiccup and Astrid respectively, and this is still not an adaptation I am extremely excited for, but I do think these are both very talented young actors, so that is good. The two adaptations I am most shaky on in terms of being confident in what the final product will look like, though I still hope for them, are How to Train Your Dragon and the One Piece live action, because one, I'm just not sure it's needed, and the other, I'm just not sure it can be done. But now, a new segment for Fantasy News I am very excited to introduce. We are going to be featuring authors from the Goblin Horde, who can submit the books they have released in the Discord server under a new channel for self-pub authors to put in their works, and I will be getting through 5 every week here in Fantasy News. That does mean I will probably be behind for a long time, but it also means that you can go ahead and check out some books that have been written by some of your peers. So here is a fun quick segment before we get into some negative news. And for a little bit of an experiment here in Fantasy News, we're going to be giving shout outs to self-pub authors within the Goblin Horde who have posted their books to be mentioned in Fantasy News within the Discord server. And we're going to go ahead and start it off with the first one ever being The Penny Lich, a fantasy sitcom. Pitched as, if you like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Office, and New Girl, as well as Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, and D&D, then this is a perfect mixture of the two. It follows a group of characters that form a guild of the people at a local tavern called the Penny Lynch, and their day-to-day workings of trying to figure out life and fight off crazy monsters and wizards. Moving on from there, we're coming to a book from Anthony Paul, an indie author who has released The Night of Gnomes. The paperback is available on Amazon, and it is pitched as a fantasy story for children and adults who miss being children. Next up, we have from NC Koisis, which I think I'm saying wrong, the series called The Swords of Dominion. Book 1 being The Sword of Mercy and Wraith, and Book 2, The Pyres of Vengeance. Next up, we have Andy Ewington, the writer of The Hero Interviews. Pitched as, heroes, you can't swing a cat without hitting one. You can't even hatch a nefarious plan without some adventuring party invading your dungeon to thwart you. So it stands to reason they're a force for good, right? Well, yes and no. With reviews saying, love D&D, Terry Pratchett, and dying of laughter, this book is for you. The Hero Interviews has been pushed the highest on my TBR of any self-pub book posted in this batch. We're going to end this experimental section of Fantasy News, though, by talking about Richard Merle and his debut novel, Weirder: Sorrows of Time. Inspired by a mixture of D&D, Game of Thrones, and Pan's Labyrinth, it was released on Amazon a few weeks ago and is the first of a 4-book series. Also, mad shout out to having a cover artist like Felix Ortiz. You gotta love the guy's work. And not only for that reason, this does win my favorite cover of this batch. These 4 self-pub books are available and linked in the self-pub promo section of the Discord channel. If you would like to support some self-pub authors who are also fans of the Goblin Horde, go ahead and check them on out. I'll be sure to have them linked in the description down below as well. I love how beautiful so many of those books seem. But now, let's talk about the drama that has unfurled in the last week around the SPFBOs, or the Self-Published Awards for Science Fiction and Fantasy Books. There was a vote happening for anyone publicly available to pick the best cover of all of the entrants into the SPFBOs. The problem is that the cover that won was accused of having AI-generated elements within it. This caused a kerfuffle, the response to which, I believe reasonably from the SPFBOs, was to simply just have the artist prove it was not AI generated. The artist supplied a bunch of sketches, some compelling evidence that it wasn't, then apparently people still were not convinced. So with the distress happening in the situation, the cover was just pulled back from consideration, meaning the second place winner got best cover, with the final blow of the story being that apparently, according to Mark Lawrence, whose accounting of this I am pulling from to cover this story, finally evidence was provided generated that proved to some capacity that at least some elements of the cover were AI generated. And this is not a cut and dry situation entirely. I myself, again, as I've said before, am not entirely against the use of AI in stages of development for artistic endeavors. I think it is perfectly fine as an author to use an AI generator to create some images, to give a path forward for an artist you're working with to then create something entirely original. It takes away the need for you to be able to like, okay, I want her hair flaming, but not like red fire, and instead you could generate something that gives an idea for what you're going for, and 1,000 other use cases similar to that. For me though, the worst part is that moving forward, because of all of this, there won't be a fun, friendly cover contest for the SPFBOs going forward. Now, I don't blame them at all. AI coming into a space like this and people sneaking it in some ways, in a way that could take away an award from an artist who did something entirely original and deserves that award, means that, yeah, for people running this without perfect AI detection, they're kind of hand-tied. It's either let a competition go forward where you can't trust the results and people can get screwed, or don't. And yeah, don't is the easier option, especially when you're doing something like this for a community. Now, what makes this even more tragic is apparently author Michael Fletcher saw this art for this cover and thought it was great, as did so many other people. And so he tracked down the artist, reached out to them, which by the way is an account that's now deleted, and got them to do a cover for their upcoming book, Ward and All. I assume, hearing about this fiasco, they then took their cover and ran it through an AI detector, and ding, 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 it turns out after explicitly telling the artist they wanted nothing that was AI generated, they had been returned AI generated art. So there are now people out there actively scamming other artists out of jobs they should be paid for, and lying even in competitions while supplying partially actually in final product generated AI art. That absolutely sucks, and as someone who has had to set budgets for book releases before, sounds devastating. Fortunately, there has been a GoFundMe started for these authors where fans can chip in to help them pay a new artist to get them something that is not AI generated. We're Clayton Snyder and Michael Fletcher, authors of Norsilka Groans and various other novels. Recently, we paid an artist for a cover to our new novel, the conclusion to the Manifest Delusion series. After paying and accepting the art and setting a cover reveal date, we discovered it was AI generated against our explicit wishes. We were lied to and scammed. We cannot in good conscience continue forward with the current art when there are living artists who need to make a living. And since indie authors aren't exactly swimming in cash, we're turning to the community in hopes of rectifying this. I'm very happy to see they've already well surpassed their goal. I'll be contributing myself. It's so frustrating that such a decent chunk of my job now, and even fantasy news as a whole, is just examining new ways in which AI-generated content is stepping into the creative space where, me personally, I am only interested in hearing stories from other humans and not just things generated by algorithms. I want to see how a human can push a boundary. I'm a tech nerd, and even I am not interested in giving a company that used a super advanced piece of technology to generate a story it thinks I might like safely my money. I would rather risk it on an indie or self-pub author any day, where I could end up supporting and being a fan of someone whose career I get to watch, not just update. And it goes even further and more disgusting in my opinion, where I'm now seeing articles like, I'm making thousands using AI to write books. And maybe what annoys me the most about this is I know that 90% of the people who come across this headline and post it to Twitter as proof that like AI is the future of creativity are not going to bother reading past that headline and actually read this article from Newsweek, written by the author of these books, by the way, to promote themselves. That's why I'm not saying a name. Has released 97 of these books that are roughly 2,000 to 5,000 words each and feature from 40 to 140 AI generated images, each one taking an average of 6 to 8 hours to generate and publish. And between August and May, he, yes, made nearly $2,000. So yes, this man has made thousands of dollars selling books. Name them. I really mean that. Name them, because I have spoken to dozens of authors in my career about how they will spend hours, more than it takes this author to generate an entire book, figuring out how they want to deliver a single sentence. That is the craft of being an author, painting with words. This is not being an author, it is something else, I will give it that, and if people want to read that, that is their prerogative. But to lump this in as some kind of enriching moving forward with creativity as a whole for science fiction and fantasy, I just fundamentally disagree with. I'll even say, similar to my take on how the image generation can help with the development of art, I think things like ChatGPT could actually interestingly push forward creativity in terms of helping overcome writer's block, but just spewing out a bunch of stories that are clearly within a character limit that these chatbots have to work with and claiming it's some kind of great advancement, that is where I go, misuse of a tool. Congratulations, America. It's 2023 and we've officially created the McDonald's version of creativity. Yay. I'm not religious. This has no soul. I don't even know how to end this fantasy news. The Rock and Vin Diesel apparently are friends now. That's a thing. And Oppenheimer is going to be rated R, which Christopher Nolan hasn't had an R-rated movie in a long time. Fantasy news. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.